Good morning, dear students. In today's class, I would like to discuss the chapter, The Humiliation of a Brown Child in a European School. This is an excerpt taken from Kamala Das' autobiography, My Story. The chapter discusses the racial discrimination that she faced as a student in a European school. I would like to discuss some of the paragraphs, first few paragraphs from this chapter. The chapter begins with a description about her childhood experience. She was growing up as a child in Calcutta. At that time, the British were ruling India. So it was common for the British to have some friends among the Indians. So they sometimes visit their house as well. Here she talks about her father's superior. His name was Rose. He was a bald-headed, red-faced man. That is how she describes. So he visits the author's house occasionally. Whenever he visits, he calls her father as my good friend Mr. Nair. His visit often made the children very happy. Then she talks about her cook. This is a wonderful experience that she shares. This also shows light on some of the cultural differences that we have, and also some of the stigma that we have. Let me tell you her description about her cook. The family, once they went to her grandmother's house. We know that Kamala Das is from Kerala, and when she comes to her grandmother's house for vacation, they sent their cook to Mrs. Rose. Okay, so we already learned that Mr. Rose is a British man, and whenever they go to Kerala, and this cook, he assists Mrs. Rose's family. So when they come back, we find that this cook tries for some experiments, some culinary experiments that he undertakes. That means he tries to prepare some Western dishes. Slowly and steadily, we find that when this cook learns some of the Western dishes, he started including that in their food. So instead of rice and curry, they started to have soup, cutlet, and other Western dishes. She says that for her mother, he still continued to cook rice and the still Eastern item, but for their children, he started experimenting. And she also talks about the way her father used to eat at that time. He used fork and knife, the Western style of eating. But for the children, they had food with their hands. We know that as Keralites, we eat with our hands. We don't use fork and knife while we eat. So we find that they started eating, and you find the children, as we know, after having food, they may lick their hands. But for the cook, who was trying to adopt the Western ways of living, he felt this as something savage. I would like to end my discussion here up to this paragraphs. I'll continue with our discussion on what all things that she experienced when she started attending the schools. But let me pause here and explain some important aspects that she tries to discuss with us. Well, we need to understand that this is something that we experience even today, we have a feeling that we should imitate Western style of life. We find that some of the educated people, when they started switching to different ways of life, you can find that kind of a change in their eating habits. There is a concern that I would like to address here. Those people who consider, look at the attitude of the cook. He looked at the children as savage. That's the word that Kamaladas used. This is very remarkable here. Why? You know that some people, they consider their culture, their practices as important, superior, and they try to disregard other cultures. We know that food is part of one's culture. We have to respect different cultures. That is something that we should accept. We should not, as people who belong to India, we should not hate the Western food, or we should not say your food culture, food habit, eating habits are not good. We should not say like that. At the same time, the British should not feel that the Eastern way of eating, the food that they have, is bad. She's trying to hint at this point. This is the first important aspect that I would like to address here. My dear students, as students, we should learn this aspect of respecting different cultures. See, when we include chapters like this, as students of higher education, we have to reflect on what we learn. Instead of merely going through the chapters and pages and try to answer the questions that come from these passages, we have to learn some insights that would help us to think about the ways that we have in our life. So my dear students, the idea that I would like to share here from these passages that we discuss, the ability to respect different cultures.